It's a cold morning in New York City. The streets are waking up, storefronts open, traffic builds. Life looks normal. But behind closed doors, a war that's been building for decades is about to turn violent. Across the city, FBI agents are already in position. Unmarked cars idle on quiet blocks. Wiretaps are still recording. Surveillance teams wait for the signal. These men aren't street criminals. They are untouchables. Mafia bosses who have ruled from behind restaurant tables and social clubs for generations. For years, the FBI couldn't touch them. Until now. At dawn, doors will be kicked in. Bosses will be dragged from their homes. Entire crime families will be charged. Not for one murder or one deal, but for everything. This isn't a single arrest. It's not even a single case. It's a coordinated federal assault on the American Mafia. Planned in secret, built over years, and executed in one devastating strike. This is the moment the balance of power finally shifts. This is the FBI's war on the Mafia and how it changed organized crime forever. RICO, the FBI's war on the Mafia. This video is partially based on the book Bringing Down the Mob, The War Against the American Mafia by Thomas Repetto. Repetto was a police officer and author who went deep into the criminal underworld of the American Mafia for his research. Due to the nature of some anonymous sources, we're unable to verify all the information independently. We highly recommend checking out the book. January 1983. A cold afternoon outside Chicago. Two longtime business associates step out of a car into an icy suburban parking lot. As they walk between parked cars, two men suddenly rush up behind them. A gun fires, again and again. One man goes down. Alan Dorfman, an insurance salesman with close ties to the Chicago mob, collapses onto the frozen pavement. By the time the paramedics arrive, he shows no signs of life. Across the country, the news breaks quickly. His murder dominates headlines. But inside the world he comes from, no one is shocked. For more than 30 years, Dorfman stands at the center of American organized crime. Not as a street enforcer, nor as a killer, but as something far more powerful. A businessman. Through his control of the Teamsters Pension Fund, Dorfman funnels millions of dollars into mafia-backed ventures, especially Las Vegas casinos. Money that cements the mob's grip on gambling, unions, and political influence nationwide. The Teamsters Union itself, connected to top executives, powerful politicians, even the White House, operates like a silent extension of the mafia. Just weeks before his death, Dorfman was convicted alongside Teamsters President Roy Williams and Chicago mob boss Joe Lombardo for attempting to bribe a United States senator. He is out on bail facing decades in prison, and he knows too much. If he talks, the damage is catastrophic. And in the mafia's world, uncertainty is unacceptable. Dorfman has to go. The American Mafia is not just a criminal gang of individuals. It's an institution. Since the 1920s, the Mafia stands at the center of American organized crime, shaping unions, construction, gambling, and politics across entire cities. At its height, the Mafia seamlessly links the underworld to the upper world. Criminals, businessmen, politicians, and public officials bound together by mutual benefit. And yet, the organization never exceeds more than a few thousand full members. That such a small group holds such immense power is one of the most extraordinary phenomena in American history. But why does the Mafia survive? Because it masters one skill better than anyone else: buying protection. For decades, the Mafia learns how to place itself inside the center of American life. Union leadership, construction contracts, insurance companies, political organizations, the places where decisions are made quietly, far from the street. The goal is never to control everything. It is to control enough. Over time, influence replaces force, Violence becomes rare, precise, and purposeful, used only when the system itself is threatened. The Mafia's structure is heavily influenced by American political machines. Bosses sit at the top, insulated from day-to-day operations. Beneath them are underbosses and capos responsible for specific neighborhoods or industries. They lead crews of soldiers and associates who handle the work on the ground. Each layer knows only what it needs to know. Responsibility fades as it moves upward. The design is deliberate. When crimes occur, the people who benefit most are the furthest removed from them. This distance keeps leadership in plain sight, yet untouchable. For years, this arrangement works almost flawlessly. Then, briefly, the curtain is pulled back. In 1957, in the quiet town of Appalachian, New York, police stumble onto a gathering that was never meant to be discovered. Mafia leaders from across the country, men who are supposed to remain separate, are suddenly seen together in one place. For the first time, the national scope of the Mafia is undeniable. The exposure is embarrassing. It forces public acknowledgement. Congressional hearings follow. Official reports describe a coordinated criminal network operating across the United States. But exposure does not equal collapse. The Mafia studies the mistake and adjusts. By the late 1950s, the American Mafia is quieter, more cautious, and more deeply woven into legitimate institutions than ever before. Its leaders understand that the greatest threat is not law enforcement pressure, but uncertainty from within. Which is why anyone who knows too much or threatens to disrupt the balance, even unintentionally, represents a danger to the entire structure. By the time the federal authorities fully acknowledge the Mafia's existence and scope, they are no longer facing a loose criminal conspiracy. They are confronting a mature institution. And for a long time, that makes it nearly impossible to touch. After the Appalachian scandal, law enforcement no longer has the luxury of denial. Organized crime is national, coordinated, and deeply entrenched. The Mafia is real, and it is not going away. What remains unresolved is how to fight it. For decades, American policing has been built around individuals. Crimes are investigated after they occur. Suspects are identified, arrested, and prosecuted. This system works best when violence is visible and evidence direct. But none of those conditions apply to the Mafia. At the federal level, the FBI enters the war against the Mafia with electronic surveillance, which offers a partial answer. In cities like Chicago and New York City, FBI agents take extraordinary risks to plant hidden microphones in mob meeting places. For the first time, agents can hear how Mafia leaders speak when they believe no one is listening. But the intelligence has limits. Much of it is obtained illegally. Bugs require trespass. Wiretaps violate federal law. So none of it can be used in court. It remains internal, useful for understanding structure, relationships, and patterns, but useless for bringing down the Mafia. Local law enforcement faces even greater challenges. Police departments are tied to city politics, and city politics are often tied to organized crime. In many places, officers understand exactly who the mob leaders are, but they can't do anything about it. Where politicians tolerate, or quietly benefit from, Mafia activity, police are expected to do the same. Attempts at cooperation between federal and local authorities remain informal and inconsistent. Rivalries run deep, and while joint task forces are often discussed, they are rarely sustained. Even major federal victories fail to make a lasting difference. When Vito Genovese is convicted and sent to prison in 1959, he maintains his influence from behind bars. When top bosses face tax charges, the cases feel disconnected from their real power. The crimes that matter most remain legally untouched. By the early 1960s, the pattern is clear. Law enforcement is collecting intelligence faster than it can use it. Investigations are growing more complex, more expensive, and more politically sensitive. Yet the tools available remain fundamentally unchanged. The government is fighting individuals, but the Mafia is operating as an organization. As long as the mismatch persists, the outcome is predictable. The state can harass, disrupt, and occasionally embarrass the Mafia, but it cannot dismantle it. Not yet. By now, one thing should be obvious. The Mafia is not built like a gang. It is built like an institution designed to survive losses. But that raises a more fundamental question. How does this system actually sustain itself? To understand how the Mafia lasts for generations, you have to understand the machine that feeds it. The machine follows the same loop over and over again. Step 1. Access to capital. The Mafia doesn't always steal cash on the street. It works through legitimate-looking channels. In Vegas, this meant Teamsters pension loans. In the 1960s and 70s, Alan Dorfman and other mob-connected officials could approve loans from the union's Central States Pension Fund to build casinos. The money didn't go to gangsters directly. It went to middlemen with clean records who could legally take out loans and manage casinos. On paper, it was a normal investment. But behind the scenes, the mob controlled the project. Step 2. Building a front. The loan financed a casino, often one that had previously failed or was undervalued. The target was clear: go on a spending spree, open a high-profile venue, and draw in the tourists. The operation appeared legal. The casino was licensed and regulated. Labor unions worked the same way, using legitimate contracts to launder influence and extract payments from employers. Mafia-connected union leaders placed loyal allies in key roles, and in some cases ran entire local unions themselves. Step 3. The skim. The real money never appeared in the records. In Las Vegas, cash was taken out before it was ever counted. Employees skimmed tables, rigged machines, and quietly pulled money through small gaps in the casino's oversight. The same method worked in labor unions. The Mafia took cuts from the union dues, pension funds, and employer payoffs. They used threats of strikes or violence to maintain control. Their objective never changed: obtain cash that flowed freely, avoiding taxes and detection. Step 4. Protection and enforcement. Every money loop needed security. The Mafia used force and influence to maintain control. In Vegas, oversight from influential figures and political connections protected the skim. In unions, threats, bribes, and control over union bosses kept outsiders away. Dirty cops, corrupt politicians, and union insiders all benefited from the arrangement. Actual violence was uncommon, but the threat was always there, enough to stop anyone from talking or interfering. Step 5. Flow and reinvestment. The cash flowed up to the bosses. Some went into new businesses, some into their pockets. They repaid loans to look legitimate, which let the system grow. Vegas and labor racketeering taught the Mafia the same lesson. A well-run operation could last decades. It didn't need chaos, just control and influence. The formula was simple: legal businesses as fronts, hidden cash, enforcers, and oversight. Each piece supported the others, creating a self-sustaining machine. Authorities could investigate and occasionally disrupt it, but unless they hit every part at once, the machine kept running. By the late 1970s, law enforcement had mapped the Mafia inside and out. They understood the structure, the money, and the chain of command. What was missing was a way to prosecute it as a whole, until a law professor proposed a new approach. G. Robert Blakey had studied organized crime for years and reached a simple conclusion. The Mafia survived because the law treated it as a collection of individuals, rather than a functioning system. Blakey's solution was to reverse the logic of prosecution. Instead of asking what crime did this man commit, the law would ask, what organization is this man knowingly part of, and how does it operate? On October 15, 1970, that idea became law. The Racketeer Influenced and Corrupt Organizations Act, RICO, made participation in a criminal enterprise itself a crime. If prosecutors could prove a pattern of racketeering tied to an organization, they could charge its leaders, even if they never pulled the trigger or collected a payoff personally. For the first time, the Mafia structure itself was prosecutable. The consequences were profound. Evidence that once stood alone could now be presented together to show how an enterprise functioned over time. Juries were no longer asked to evaluate isolated acts. They were shown a working organization. And once that organization was proven to exist, everyone who knowingly sustained it became legally vulnerable. When RICO was finally deployed against the Mafia at full scale, the results were unprecedented. Whole leadership teams were indicted as one. Governing structures were treated as criminal enterprises. Lengthy sentences eliminated not just people, but the knowledge and connections that held the organization together. The Mafia was still capable of violence and capable of earning money, but it was no longer protected by its own design. Blakey had completely changed the legal frame. For decades, the Mafia's organizational structure had been its protection. RICO turned that same structure into a weapon against it. The state was no longer chasing crimes, it was prosecuting the system itself. By the late 1980s, the pressure on the Mafia had become relentless. For the first time, it was not simply losing people, it was losing the systems that allowed it to function. In Chicago, the Mafia's traditional shield, its influence over courts and politicians, was stripped away. Judges were exposed, lawyers were courted, and police officers indicted. What had once been an invisible layer of protection became a liability. Even the courthouse itself was described in federal filings as part of a criminal enterprise. In New York, the strategy focused less on personalities and more on infrastructure. The five families had survived decades of arrests because their economic base remained intact. That base was now targeted directly. Construction, garment trucking, airports, fish markets, waste hauling. Industries that had quietly generated influence as much as cash were dismantled one by one. The lesson was clear. Imprisonment alone did not weaken the Mafia. Removing control over money did. By the 1990s, the Mafia still existed, but its era of control had passed. In many cities, families collapsed under internal pressure, informants, and too many leadership changes. In others, they survived in reduced form, smaller and far less visible. By the early 2000s, official assessments described the American Mafia as weakened and fragmented. In some regions, nearly extinct. It appeared that RICO had achieved what decades of traditional prosecutions could not. The modern Mafia no longer needed to dominate neighborhoods or control entire industries. Instead, it embedded itself within existing criminal and financial networks. Drug trafficking, money laundering, and international partnerships replaced territorial control as primary sources of income. Italian-American groups increasingly cooperated with foreign criminal organizations. Influence shifted away from local streets and toward global connections. But this evolution came at a cost. Without clear hierarchy, authority weakened. Without clear succession, disputes became harder to manage. When internal balance failed, violence returned, not as strategy, but as breakdown. That is why, decades after the Mafia was declared defeated, a New York boss could still be murdered. The 2019 killing of Frank Cali, leader of the Gambino crime family, wasn't a demonstration of strength anymore, but as evidence of instability. Such killings signal fracture and weakness, moments when the internal order could no longer hold. RICO did not eliminate organized crime, but it broke its infrastructure. The American Mafia lost its reach, its protection, and its control, but not its existence. It no longer rules cities or commands industries, but it has not vanished. It survives as a smaller, quieter, and hidden criminal organization that's still capable of harm. The war against the Mafia as we know it may be over, but this doesn't mean it can be ignored, because organized crime always finds a way back into society.